would be a great transition into the MVP conversation. But I want to start because people always say that Brock Purdy hasn't really faced that much adversity. He hasn't had to come from behind. Now, obviously, this wasn't a fourth quarter behind. I think they were ahead by 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. But when you start, I can't remember the last time. I know they've had maybe 1 or 2 games where they've had a 3 and out on their first offensive possession. But most of the 49ers games this year, they've scored right away and they've had a stop right away on defense. This game started and it looked like it was going to be a completely different game. It looked very scary. I want to know your reaction to that because I was talking with Eric Crocker and he made me feel like I'm a terrible fan because he said he came away from that first quarter feeling like the 49ers were going to blow them out because he was like, oh, well, the Eagles were only up by 6. And obviously, like, they're not going to play that bad the whole game. And I don't know. I guess I'm too emotional. I was like, this is just who they are. They're just bad, and they're going to play this way the whole time. So I'd love to know how you felt during those first two quarters, or first quarter. I was trying to say 2 drives. And then how you felt as the game went on. There was that one drive that really, like, for me, it was kind of slow, and you're like, okay, and then they kind of bam got into it. But I'd love to hear how you, as a fan, thought about Brock Purdy handling that, and then how you just felt watching the game.
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that going into the game, like I had a very analytical approach to it. Like I do my preview shows on Friday and I try to be very objective. I look at all like the cautious matchups for the 49ers and then like favorable matchups. And of course, like at the end of it, like I always come away thinking the 49ers are going to be able to exploit the favorable matchup. So I always choose the 49ers to win pretty much every game. And so this game was no different. That being said, when the game was about to start, like I had the butterflies in my stomach, I had anxiety, like I was like, I felt like I was gonna throw up. Like it was
I think
crazy.
you
So
did that. I think I liked it. So I was like,
the
I feel
fan
better.
in me kicks in, right? You know, when you sit down and watch a big game like this. So but people are different. You know, I know Croc all throughout the week. He was teasing how confident he was in this game from the beginning. He kept posting that meme hiding in the shadows, you know. So he was ready for it. And it's not that I didn't think the 49ers could win like that big, but I guess I was expecting a closer battle, or I thought like at some point the Eagles were going to make a comeback
I mean,
attempt.
it's fair to assume that, right? Because they did that in all their other games.
That's how every game has like gone with them, right? So I was at least expecting an attempt, and ultimately I thought the 49ers would be able to stop it because they have a great defense right now, and in particular a great second half defense. So that's kind of how I saw the game going. Now, that first quarter I didn't expect because I actually was thinking that the 49ers offense was going to get rolling quickly. Like I thought it was going to be a high scoring game in the first half. Like I thought right away it was going to be like a lot of points, both teams like kind of going back and forth maybe. I think the 49ers defense was going to be able to stop the Eagles, but you know, because they're playing from behind, like they would get their points too kind of thing. So, yeah, the first quarter had me a little concerned, but at the same time, like you come away very impressed with the fact that defense is able to hold this Eagles offense to just 2 field goals on what seemed like pretty successful drives by the Eagles, right? So that's impressive, and that's something they've been doing like in a lot of games, and it's almost like they want to feel out their opponent a little bit, you know, and it's very much like bend don't break. Like we talk about this defense all the time being bend don't break. And then they get to a point where it's just like you're not getting anything on us kind of thing. And that's when from like the second quarter on, that's pretty much what the game was. Even, you know, when the Eagles did get their touchdowns, I mean, it really didn't even seem like I don't know. It just didn't seem like there was any chance because the 49ers at that point kind of sank their teeth into the Eagles, so to speak. and started moving the football. And you saw that the Eagles were struggling to move the ball. And we haven't seen the 49ers defense kind of give up a late lead like that. So I just didn't think it would happen at that point. And the way that the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, like the way they were moving the football, I think the 49ers had the advantage like from that point. But it was like night and day. From the first quarter to like the second, it was like a completely different like offense. So credit to Kyle Shanahan for ripping the the first 25 scripted plays, because clearly that wasn't working. It wasn't going to work. But he made the adjustment quick.
When
And
we talk about Super Bowl, I mean, these are things that people question about Kyle Shanahan, right? Like he's
yeah,
married to his game plan. He's not able to make in-game adjustments. He, tries to stick to his script and won't falter. I mean, we really saw, some people say like won't admit when he's wrong, really stubborn, these things. I feel like if you were going to go by those narratives, which I'm not even sure if I would, but if you were going to go by them, I mean, he's shown a ton of growth this entire season with how he's handled Brock Purdy and just the quarterback situation overall. But also, this game was kind of a maybe like little display of a general theme that we've seen from Kyle Shanahan, which is his ability to trust in his playmakers, his ability to have faith in his quarterback, even if maybe there's question. Brock Purdy looked a little bit shaky, I think, maybe a little rattled to start the game. Kyle Shanahan continued to throw it. He did mix in CMC. He got the ball in his playmakers' hands. He adjusted during the game and didn't, choke. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that narrative on Kyle was always just slightly overblown because I don't think people were taking into account how much the quarterback impacted Kyle's ability to grow the offense. Like I think it's pretty clear now, like in
Now.
hindsight. Yeah, and now I think it's pretty clear that the offense was held back because it had to be
Yeah.
within a very certain it was
Limited
in a very
space.
certain structure, and it was a limiting structure, to make sure that the previous quarterback could sustain his success, right? Like that's what it was all about, protecting him from himself, protecting the team from him and all that stuff. So to a
Isn't
certain
that
extent, yeah,
crazy?
like it was conservative, like, but that, and maybe he could have grown out of that a little bit, but I think he just preferred not to because I mean the 49ers defense was as good as it was and all this stuff. But I think we're seeing now the growth because he's and Brock being so young, Brock is growing too. So like they're kind of growing together.
Yeah.
Kyle as a play caller, as I don't know, as a game manager, but like I mean as a head coach, like managing
Yeah.
the game, not the same meaning as when we call a quarterback a game manager. Um and so I think it's been really cool to see because we're seeing the offense kind of like bloom, and every week it's just taking on a different like life form almost. And it's cool. It's cool to see the new wrinkles, because I think Kyle has always been that smart. It's just I don't think he always had all of this available to him. Um,
It's kind of amazing to see as like fans. I feel like we hypothesized. People were always like, let Kyle get his quarterback and then let's see what he can do. But because they were having so much success, like making it to the NFC Championship game, making it far in the playoffs, making it to the Super Bowl, I think there was also maybe this hesitancy that was like, well, like, you know, this person can't be limiting the offense that much because they are having so much success and the offense does look good and Kyle Shanahan still looks like an offensive genius. And I just think that it's pretty incredible that like scoring above 30 points, above 35 points, scoring 42 points against the Cowboys and the Eagles is stuff that seems I don't know if easy, but seems like almost like like now I'm like, oh, I should have expected that. Like they dominate teams. They're on fire.
Yeah.
They are the best team in the, it's pretty cool, that distinction. Do you think that Brock Purdy should be in that MVP conversation with Mahomes? Obviously Jalen Hurts was in it, potentially
Mhm.
Tua. There's some arguments for Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill. Going into this game, I was kind of thinking potentially it would, if I know that it leans quarterback, but I was thinking if there was like not that quarterback bias, that it should potentially go to a Tyreek Hill or a Christian McCaffrey. After this game, does your opinion change on Brock's candidacy as MVP? He wasn't, throwing deep bombs down the field, but he completely optimized this offense and his playmakers in yesterday's game. Do you think that it being a big game on a big stage is going to catapult him into that conversation more? I know it has, but for you personally.
Yeah, I mean, I already thought like before this game that he deserved to be in the conversation. I don't think for me personally, because I already had him in the conversation, that this game necessarily moved the needle as much for me. Um, but I mean, that being said, it was still an impressive performance. Like after that first quarter, I think there were a lot of spots where he himself like put the team in good position, like converting third downs. Like a lot of those were really like clutch plays, right? And so yeah, I give him credit for that. And he's been in the conversation for me for a while now. um yeah, it's tough to say. I think we're starting to see some quarterbacks kind of dwindle out. Like Jalen Hurts, does he deserve to still be in the conversation? Like that's now the debate that people I think need to start having. And we'll see. I think these last few weeks is, this is obviously the final push for MVP talk and consideration. But yeah, he absolutely deserves to be in the discussion. I guess like I'll throw the question back to fans, and I've actually been meaning to put this on Twitter as like a poll or something. If you can only pick one MVP on the team, like who would it be? Brock Purdy or Christian McCaffrey? Because there really can only be one on one team. Same goes for Tua and Tyreek Hill. Which player is the engine of the team succeeding, because that would make them like the most valuable player, and which one is benefiting from the other. So
Did you Did you hear James Bradbury after the game? He was kind of asked about how and why they struggled against the 49ers offense, and he really put it on not only scheme but on Christian McCaffrey, saying basically with him on the team, they pretty much can't play man to man. He said it's very tough to play this team with man to man defenses across the board because they have such a dynamic running back in Christian McCaffrey who can get mismatches against linebackers and safeties. We want to do a good job of mixing up our zones in there. They won with the mismatches and whatnot. He's not just a running back; he's a playmaker too. And then he said they're a tough team to beat. Hopefully, we'll see them again. And apparently, later on in the quote, he referenced Christian McCaffrey a couple more times, which I thought was kind of interesting. We'll get to him later, but I considered Deebo Samuel the MVP of the game. So
yeah.
I thought, and obviously it's not a quiet game. He had, like 130 yards and a touchdown. But when talking about Christian McCaffrey, I was kind of surprised that was when asked, okay, what makes them so difficult? We're talking about Brock Purdy's amazing game, getting the ball to a myriad of playmakers. Deebo
Mhm.
Samuel, Angry Deebo is my favorite player. We'll talk about him. But I was wondering if you heard those comments from Badbury about Christian McCaffrey, and if you're surprised that when players were asked, okay, why was this game so difficult, that it did go back to, because you're talking about MVP of the team. I think Christian McCaffrey definitely makes Brock's life a little bit easier. I'm not saying that makes, I'm not
Right.
saying
Yeah.
that.
No, no, not at all. Like you're not taking anything away from Brock by saying that, I don't think. But yeah, like I've said it. Like of course Brock Purdy benefits from the playmakers that he has, and they're all great in their own right. Christian McCaffrey, like, because he does it as a running back, make like what Bradbury said. I hadn't heard the quote, but like that's a great quote, and that's the exact dilemma that teams have with defending this team, with defending McCaffrey. He's just like a cheat code on the field for the team that was already good before, he even arrived, right? A part of me, like, I was wondering yesterday, I was like, let's just say like the 49ers, like maybe Jimmy Garoppolo suffered his injury earlier in the season and Brock Purdy like started for the 49ers before they made the trade for McCaffrey. Do you think like the 49ers would feel inclined to like still trade for McCaffrey?
Ooh, that's an interesting
I
question.
think it still would have, because
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
John Lynch and Kyle, like, they say it all the time. Like, yeah, like,
But
we're
that
always looking for ways
desperation
to
might
get
not have
better.
been there as much, which is
Yeah, like,
interesting.
I kind of wonder. I just wonder. So that's an interesting way to look at it too. But I think, yeah, like a lot of people talk about the just the dilemma of defending Christian McCaffrey, and you see it on tape because people point out like the gravity, the CMC gravity. He literally has an orbit of defenders around him at all times. Orbit, like literally at least two guys around him
Yeah.
um all the time. If they don't, he's getting the ball. So uh yeah, that's the advantage of having Christian McCaffrey that makes him valuable to this team, and he himself will elevate the success of the entire team because of that, right? So I think
So
you can make a case for either of these guys, but I think I would lean Christian McCaffrey, but not to take away anything from Brock Purdy at all. I think Brock Brock's been awesome.
I mean,
He's
and Brock Purdy makes Christian McCaffrey's job easier too because he's so able to optimize all the playmakers, which does
yeah,
get Debo open in certain
like
places. So
people can't stack the box, like
yeah,
they used to, or like they can't have a game
I think
plan, or
that's
it's
an
like we're gonna
important.
force this 49ers quarterback to throw on us. That
Yeah,
used
I
to
like
work,
that. I like
right?
this because
But
I think that that's an important maybe distinction to bring up because I agree that I think um Christian McCaffrey brings so much to this team, but I do see
yeah.
that, being discredited with him helping Brock Purdy so much. But I do. I think it's important that we say, Brock Purdy also helps Christian McCaffrey. Now I
Mhm.
think maybe Christian
Yeah.
McCaffrey helps Brock Purdy more. And I just think the best part
Nothing wrong
about the
with saying that.
49ers
Yeah.
is that they have both of them on the team right now.
Right.
And although it's fun to debate which one is the MVP, having them both on your team is a good way to get you to be Super Bowl odd favorites and potentially